Welcome to the Niche Pursuits podcast. Today we are joined by Nick Jordan with Workello.com. Now, Workello is a content distribution company. They produce content as an agency for a lot of large organizations across the world, and they have a pretty unique approach to the way that they do SEO. As a matter of fact, as Nick will tell you, he really does not consider himself to be very proficient at SEO, certainly not in the area of some of the other topics like backlinks and on-page technical SEO. As a matter of fact, as Nick kind of goes through, he basically talks about and settled on the idea that there's so many factors in SEO, but the most important one and really the only one that matters is content, and specifically content velocity, producing really high content at velocity. And he's actually been able to prove this through a number of different clients that he works on. So we talk about what it looks like to produce content at scale. We're talking 800 articles a month for a website, a lot of them. What the keyword research process looks like, how you organize the different keywords into articles, which ones get combined, which ones get unique articles, word counts, how you organize the structure of the articles. This is really a content lesson in scale. He does go into depth about how you don't have to publish 800 articles a month for this concept to work, but really what you're trying to do is you're trying to win authority on the basis of producing a large volume of content. And by doing that, you don't have to focus on things like backlinks and a lot of the on-page technical things. So he basically outlines the strategy. He gives us, in many ways, the keys of the kingdom. He talks about internal linking and how important that is. He talks about creating topical relevance and how really that's the goal at the end of the day. So this is a really good interview. And even if you're someone who can't produce anywhere near that volume of articles per month, the concepts still apply. And he's clear about that he's seen this strategy work all the way down to 20 articles a month. But the concept is about owning the authority of your niche with content and not needing to rely on some of the other metrics that many SEOs do. And Nick's a really smart guy as much as he downplays himself. And so he has some really great insights into how to do this. He's created a nice framework around hiring people because obviously you'd have to have a lot of writers there. And so he does share some details about how he hires writers, what he looks for, and his team at Workello and how they're making that easier for other people to do. So go take a look at what he's doing at Workello.com and enjoy the interview. If you're looking for high quality backlinks in every niche imaginable, check out the industry leader when it comes to premium links, and that's Authority Builders. Authority Builders is the same company Spencer used in his niche site project number 4, which he recently sold for $250,000. They have a large selection of link types, from guest posts to link insertions to business citations. You can choose your links a la carte or use their managed service ABC Plus to let one of their SEO experts analyze your site and niche and take care of the entire backlink strategy for you. You can learn more at authority.builders. Welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman. Today we are joined by Nick Jordan with Workello.com. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, really excited to be here.
So I don't usually ask where guests are joining us from, but I mean, I have to ask you what island in the Bahamas you're at right now.
I'm actually in Eastern Europe. There's snow everywhere, and I'm out here thinking warm thoughts at the moment.
It's good. I like it. Yeah, we're recording here in the dead of winter. And I have to say, although I'm not in Eastern Europe, it's not as cold where I am. That background looks pretty attractive right now.
Yeah, I think all us SEOs are just out here looking forward to the next Chiang Mai SEO conference. Hopefully they do it this year.
I was going to say, hopefully 2022 is the year we're back on track for things, right?
Got our fingers crossed.
Oh, I know. You and me both. So, hey, today we're talking about content. I'm so excited for today's interview. You know, I've been going back and forth in preparation for this, and I'll tell you, I just think it's so many good things that we're gonna be going through today. Why don't you give us some background though? Bring us up to speed on who Nick is and your past and your history.
Yeah, definitely. So Workello started in 2019 as this content agency called contentdistribution.com. And our claim to fame is we've taken 4 projects from 0 to 100,000 organics per month without building backlinks and without doing technical stuff. And the biggest project went from 0 to 1.5 million organics per month in about 24 months. And the client that we executed this campaign for, we took from a seed stage valuation to a $210 million Series B valuation by Andreessen Horowitz through SEO.
Wow. Wow, through SEO, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, and we did it in a way that doesn't look like SEO to most people. Of the 45 people we have on our team, there's 3 people on our PM team. 2 of them didn't have any SEO experience before doing SEO, and we don't do the backlink stuff and we don't do the technical stuff. And the reason is because, despite the glasses and the collared shirt, I'm not a smart guy. And when I was getting into SEO, I said, this backlink stuff and this technical stuff is too complicated for me. If I'm going to do SEO, I have to find a way that works without having to know how to do those things. And I discovered a way that I'm going to share with you guys on this podcast.
Well, if you took someone to that many page views in that short of a time period, I think you're probably okay on the smarts, but we'll save that debate maybe for another day. What is your background before you started doing Workello in 2019? What brought you into SEO?
Yeah, so I'm a startups guy. I've spent my entire career in early stage startups. If I wasn't trying to start my own, I was in a sales role at someone else's startup. And I joined this company, employee number 8. We grew to 200 people in 4 years, bootstrapped. And at the end of it, I had this amazing skill set, but I looked around and said, I want to be a founder, not an enterprise biz dev guy. And, I don't know marketing. I just know sales. And so 5 years ago, I left my cushy tech job. I took a job making less than minimum wage at a local marketing agency because I assumed that if I had to sell SEO, I would have to learn how to do it in order to sell it. And it happened. I was there for 2 years before I took my first project from 0 to 100,000 organics a month. And then after that, I decided to go out on my own.
So clearly on your own, you've been successful. Where did you start when you went out on your own? Where did you start finding clients, and how did you develop this kind of unique approach to SEO that a lot of people, don't take?
So at Logic Inbound, I took their blog from 0 to 100K a month in about 13 months. And the traffic that we accumulated wasn't very valuable in terms of revenue, but it was very valuable in terms of informing how I think Google search works. And so through the course of this campaign, there's a couple keywords that ended up informing the strategy that I still use today. We ended up outranking Shopify for is Shopify safe? We ended up outranking Instagram for Instagram support. This is going to sound crazy, but if you Google Instagram support at the time, we were above Instagram. And then we were right below Shopify on Shopify support. And then when I looked at why we were able to achieve these rankings, I was able to make some conclusions. We had a real URL that was friendly and it described the thing that the page was about. And then when you land on the page, we had a bunch of content, way more content than the official pages from Shopify and Instagram. And it started getting my mind, basically my theory is today is that Google search is highly influenced by user engagement metrics. Things like time on site, pages visited, bounce rate, return visitors, overall site engagement help Google understand whether one page of content is more valuable than another page of content. And I think Google uses the value of content heavily in its ranking algorithm.
When you were able to outrank some of these major brands, maybe I will pick one, Shopify, Instagram, just help us understand, outline the specifics of what your page looked like and what was different about your page in comparison to maybe Shopify's support page or Instagram support page in these cases.
Yeah, so if you look at Instagram support page, the URL is filled with numbers. It's not friendly. It doesn't have any human readable words. And then when you actually land on the page, it's about 100 words of text. And it basically says you're out of luck. And we put together, an optimized article across the URL, the meta description, the H2s, targeting Instagram support. And then we had a bunch of content talking about all the reasons you might contact support, how successful you're going to be, and various routes for you to explore. And ultimately, I think that because we went above and beyond what Instagram did, our content created more value to the user, and that value was reflected in the user engagement metrics of our page versus Instagram's page. Same thing with Shopify. The page we ended up outranking was a form page, which means their URL was gobbledygook. There was no H1, there was no H2s, and the content that was on the page was limited to whatever the user posted, whereas ours was completely optimized for the keywords we wanted to rank for, and it was super robust and covered basically the entire intent behind that search is Shopify safe. And so these keywords weren't very monetizable to our agency, but approaching Google from the perspective that if I create the best page of content, Google will give visibility to that content is still in play today. Over the last couple of years, our agencies published 10,000 pages of content. We've built no new backlinks, and we currently have almost 200,000 keywords on page one. And because of our relentless focus on content quality and almost no focus on technical stuff and zero focus on backlinks, the success that we've had, to me, tells me that content quality drives rankings. And because Google wants to give the user the page that creates the most value for that user.
So at this point, we've kind of landed on this idea that Google likes, again, in what you've found, a lot of content, and that you have to publish a lot in order to get your strategy to work with no backlinks, with no link building, with no technical SEO, these sorts of things. Let's talk about another point that you had brought up and just teased a bit, which is the velocity of content that you have to publish to kind of achieve these results. How important is the velocity?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a couple things that we noticed over the last couple of years. The first is that content ideas might sit on your content calendar for a couple of years. You know, if you look at any niche, RV, CBD, whatever it is, there's thousands of pages of content you need to create that will draw a qualified audience. And so an idea might sit here for 3 years before you actually get around to publishing it. And so our approach to Google is create the highest quality content that we possibly can for the keywords that we want to rank for. And then it's do that as fast as possible. And our agency's reached 800 pages a month of content.
For one client?
For one client, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Now, well, I'll come back to that. I want to know how you do that, but let's stay with the topic and the theme here. Why is velocity so important? Why is why do I mean, clearly I understand. I think everybody understands, like, in general, if the quality stays high, more is better. You're able to target more keywords. You're able to give yourself more opportunities. But velocity is maybe a little bit different because it's not just more. It's about how you're doing it and how quickly you're doing it, how rapidly you're doing it. Why is velocity itself so important?
So you can't rank for a keyword until you have a page about that keyword. And that's the primary thing, is the quicker you get content out the door, the faster you start that rankings countdown timer. And the sooner you'll begin to generate traffic for that keyword. The other thing that I've seen is I saw a recent tweet by John Mueller, and he said, well, it's hard to call a 30-page website authoritative. And if you think about it, the barrier for creating a 30-page website is zero. Literally anyone can create a 30-page website. And if Google allowed any 30-page website to take high real estate and valuable SERPs, well, there'd be two issues. The first is that there'd be too much variability because, again, the barrier to creating a 30-page website is zero. The second is that Google would be doing their users a disservice because they're going to be promoting unestablished companies that just started the other day that have 30 pages of content, and they're going to be sending their traffic there. And I think that, one, if you can publish 1,000 pages of content, Google knows that's expensive. In order to support that level of investment, you need some sort of business model that makes customers happy. And
yeah,
so
that's a lot of content.
It's a barrier to, Google's attention. If you can't get past 30 pages, and you didn't really try that hard on your business, and you're probably not making customers that happy.
Okay, so from a high level, so we have this example that we've been talking about. From a high level, how does someone, let's say that somebody does have the budget to produce a lot of content like you're talking about. I mean, you're saying 800, but maybe 400, maybe 800, maybe 500, maybe 600. But let's say somebody has that budget or has that capability. How do you begin conceptually to organize what to go after, what to target, what not to target, and maybe outline some of the strategies there?
Yeah, definitely. So I think when you're publishing this much content, keyword research becomes a major bottleneck. And you need to look at a keyword grouping tool. There's a bunch on the market. There's Keyword Chef, there's Keyword Cupid. Matt Diggity just launched one. We have one called Cluster AI. And essentially what all these tools do is they use data from Google to decide what keywords belong on what page. So you export a list of 25,000 keywords from Ahrefs, you import into one of these keyword grouping tools, and what you get back is a list of every page of content that you need to create to rank for all of the ways to get in front of your audience.
Okay, you make it sound so simple.
It turns keyword research into kind of just like, how good are you being at a thesaurus? Do you know all the variations in the keywords that you want to get onto your list? And that's really the hard part.
So it's kind of like looking for every needle in the haystack to get it on this list that you then dump into the tool.
So if you're targeting universities, well, you also have to remember to do universities, colleges,
secondary school, or
yeah. And so it becomes a vocabulary exercise, which honestly is easier than keyword research. So it kind of it enables you to do great keyword research without the experience.
Okay. So that makes sense. So you use a tool of some sort. Like Cluster AI, for example, to take a massive list of keywords and kind of parse them into general topics that go together. Let's outline that as an example. Maybe give us an example of some topics that would go together or that might end up being separate from each other that we might mess up if we don't have this kind of grouping sort of approach.
This is great because it's actually really unintuitive. You look at two keywords and you're like, as an SEO, as a writer, as a marketer, you're like, these two keywords totally belong in the same page of content. I'm going to create one page and hit both of them. And then you Google both of those keywords and the results are completely different. And that when you Google them, you'll find that there's no page that's ranking for both keywords with a single URL or a single page. And if there's no other brands that can rank for both keywords with one page, you can't either. And a great one that I've highlighted is LinkedIn profile examples versus LinkedIn headline examples. To me, as a marketer, I'm writing an article about how to make money on LinkedIn. I'm going to optimize my article, and we're going to cover, the full kind of LinkedIn money making funnel, and that these would be H2s. But really, when you look at the websites that are ranking for these keywords, they're either dedicated to optimize for one keyword or the other, not both.
So that's a case where a lot of people, and we all have these situations. Maybe yours is this example with LinkedIn and mine has to do with dogs or something, but there's these examples where you think that they are about the same topic. You think that you would write the same article, or you think you kind of combine them maybe in several H2s and create this kind of mega article about this topic. In reality, they need to be separated. And then I'm sure there's examples where you think they're two separate topics, but in reality, you'll never rank if you write a very niche down article about the long tail, because what Google wants is that actually included in a larger topical piece of content.
That's absolutely right. And just like you said, vice versa, if you try and optimize one page for two things that should really be two pages, your page won't rank for either of the keywords you were targeting because everybody else is focused on one.
So this is a bit of an aside. It's a little bit of a tangent, but maybe go with me on it. Does Google ever change their mind about that stuff? Can you ever find yourself a year down the road and needing to go back and kind of recalibrate to say, oh man, last year these were two separate topics, and now for whatever reason Google wants them on the same page? Does that ever happen? Do you pay attention to that, or does it just not matter at that scale?
For us, we found it doesn't matter, but I think you're right. I think that there is some fluctuation. 1 week Google might prefer index sites like Yelp, and then the next week they might prefer a listicle on a blog about the top restaurants instead of the. But so far we haven't ever been like, oof.
Yeah, well, at your example, 800 articles. I mean, I don't know. I would be guessing that might happen to 20 or 30, maybe. I mean, I hate to put numbers out there, but I imagine it's in the margins, right? It doesn't happen as often. So
it's in the margins. And one of the ways your framework changes when you're publishing 800 pages is it becomes no longer about any individual page. It's all about the system, the groups of pages. Is traffic, conversions, and revenue increasing week over week, and not necessarily the specific pages that are contributing to that growth. Once growth stops, then you start looking at specific pages. But as long as it's going up, you got more than enough work to do publishing more content.
So I'm going to lob this softball over to you of a question,
Yeah.
because I feel like your eyes are going to light up. You're going to hit this one out of the park. But so how important is the concept of topic clusters, topically relevant articles? How important is relevance in terms of Google's eyes and ranking? Like, just kind of go down that path a bit.
Yeah, so I think that there's that word that you use, topical relevance, is like the peanut butter and jelly to content velocity. What content velocity creates is topical relevance very quickly. People have traditionally thought about relevance and authority as in terms of backlinks, but I think that by publishing enough content and absolutely saturating a niche, you create this concept that people are calling topical relevance. Going back to John Muller's example of a 30-page website not being authoritative, still think it's very true, but I also believe that internal links act as votes to Google on how important a page is to your brand. So if we had two websites, it's website A, website B, mine's website A, and I have 1,000 internal links to one landing page, I think Google goes, that's way more important to his brand, and I'm going to make it easier to rank than that same 1,000 page website, but with only one internal link to the competitive landing page. And then I was going to say, what we've seen is that the more content we publish about a particular subtopic, the better all of that content does. And so something like CBD is very broad. We found 750,000 keywords that include CBD. If I was approaching that, I'd go super deep into one aspect of CBD. Maybe CBD papers or CBD paraphernalia or one of the 20 subtopics rather than a couple articles across the entire genre of content.
Right. And you would probably write 800 articles about the subtopic.
800 articles about different CBD strains. Now,
Wow.
One of the things I'll say about kind of content velocity and topical relevance is if you look at the top websites in any niche, they always have the most content. Unless it's like a tool or a calculator, in general, there's a very clear correlation between number of pages published and overall outcome. What I don't see is that if I look at the top 10 websites in any niche, let's say CBD, because we're already here, you won't find, in general, a website that generates 80% of the traffic with 20% of the content.
Mm-hmm. There'll be an outlier.
Over 1 million organics have at least a certain minimum number of pages. It depends on the niche. Maybe it's 500, maybe it's 1,000, but whatever it is, it generally holds true.
Okay, so content wins. How do you, I guess we'll start there. How do you publish 800 articles at that kind of velocity and maintain what we're calling, high quality in terms of your articles?
Yeah, so, 800 pages, but those 800 pages represent probably over 1 million words a month. And how do you publish? If you think about it, every word in content writing is a liability to mess something up. Spelling, grammar, formatting, positioning, literally 1 million liabilities we're publishing every month. How do we not have errors everywhere? Because even a 0.5% error rate is still tens of thousands of errors. Or not a math guy.
A lot.
So there's two pillars. The first is that you need to build a team of people who care. That's number one, because the easiest thing for an editor to do and the easiest thing for a writer to do is let shit slide. Just easier for both of them. And if they don't care, they will let things slide. But if you find the people who care, they won't let bad content go live. And now what our team looks like is of the 40 writers we have on our team and of the 10 or 15 editors and senior editors and PMs, a lot of them have, they started speaking English at a very young age. Our team is overseas, but they all started consuming media, playing video games, etc., as soon as they could start speaking their native language. The second is that they invested into continuing education. So I think like half of our team has master's degrees in English, and then the other half, if they don't have a master's degree, they went on to teach English. And these two things indicate a passion for content. In fact, a lot of the people on our team, I don't think care that we are, about our SEO abilities, about the outcomes that we create, about our stature within the industry. They're super pumped that they get to show up every day and just focus on good content. So find the people who care. And then the second part is documentation. you can't hold people accountable to doing something in a specific way unless it's documented. In content production, there's like 30 or 50 discrete steps to go from idea to published. And if you want people to do it right every single time, you need to write it down. They need to know what right looks like, because telling them verbally isn't going to work.
So hire the right people, which we could do a whole episode on, I'm sure. You gave some good tidbits there on how to source and vet and kind of look for the right people, and then have a very clearly delineated process for how you write those articles. So if you're going to be producing content at velocity, you have to have your processes nailed down.
It's true. Even think about something like uploading. If you don't document everything that goes into uploading and you're doing 800 a month, it's not going to be consistent. And that's like every single part of the content production process is documentation. Right now we have 1,000 pages, and we've kind of built a culture of documentation within our organization. It's not just me. We now have, this documentation has been worked on by 24 people over the last 2 years.
So it's substantial. So now, devil's advocate, does that get overwhelming for someone on your team, a writer, an editor, an uploader, people that do this? Is it? And again, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here. Is it? Yeah. Where does it become more than someone can handle to kind of do their job and do it well?
It's always a balance between what needs to get done and also documentation, but the benefits are too big to ignore. So the biggest one is that in order to publish this much content, you have to build a team. You can't do it on your own. And by creating documentation, I've enabled junior level team members to, punch at senior level weight. The people doing our keyword research don't have SEO experience, and it's because they have documentation and Cluster AI, but they have documentation that enables them to do that. And it doesn't overwhelm, it reduces stress, because when someone's learning something new, they get very anxious if they're not productive. The person who's responsible for training them is also anxious that the person learning is not productive. And so both sides are anxious the whole time, but with documentation, it removes that anxiety. The person who's responsible knows that the person they're training has a resource that tells them exactly what to do, and the person who's learning knows they have a resource that tells them exactly what to do.
Talk a little bit about just some of the structural tenets of the content you're producing. People love details, maybe how long are these articles? Talk about the types of keywords that you're writing in this massive content push, and what types of things you're focusing on these articles. Are they mostly informational? Are they mostly responding to different questions? Are you targeting featured snippets? I'm just hitting you with a lot of stuff, but nerd out for a bit on kind of what these articles look like, so we can get a picture of what 800 articles actually look like for someone to produce and write.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's almost entirely blog posts. There are some landing pages in there, but the majority of the work that we do is blog posts. The word count's really dynamic, and it depends on where the website that we're working on is at, and also what the first page looks like. When we're starting a new website, we generally tend to write more words because we found that's the easiest way to add more value to the user. Just talk about more stuff. But when we're in full authority mode, we've noticed that we can get away with like 800 words of content and still beat up everybody else. And so we're going to reduce our word count so we can publish more pages. Either way, what we're looking for is we're counting the number of words on the first page for each of the search results. And we want to make sure that we're in that range. If the average word count is 3,000, we don't expect to rank if we write 1,000.
So you talked about how Cluster AI allows you, there's other tools out there, allows you to kind of take a whole mess of keywords and organize them topically. And that saves you a ton of time, because otherwise you'd have to kind of manually hit every URL to evaluate. The same could be said about word counts. How are you word counts for all these different topics?
So we're pretty unsophisticated. We have our writers Google the keyword and then copy and paste the data into wordcounter.net. But there's tools like Phrase and Surfer and Market Muse and probably Jarvis that can grab this data for you and your writer and tell them what the target word count is.
Yep. So you got the word count. It's going to vary. More words at the beginning makes sense. You're trying to establish authority. Typically, there's a lot of data that suggests that, hey, if you want to outrank some people with a higher, call it domain authority, you want to be on the upper end of the word count. And then as you gain authority mode, you can kind of start to be a little bit on the lower side of things. So that makes a lot of sense. What what are the style of articles? Are these again, like how-to articles? Are they guides? I'm sure it varies across the brand and across the target keyword, but at that scale, what's working? Because I think, and again, the reason I'm asking is for maybe a typical SEO person who's building their website, they're going to put out 5, 10, 15, 20 articles a month, right? And so it looks really different, I think, in scale like yours. What types of articles are they?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because we're covering such a range of topics, we always defer the answer to that question to Google. When we Google the keyword we want to rank for, Google will tell us what type of page to create. Is it a blog post? Is it a landing page? Is it a category page? Is it a product page? If it's a blog post, is it a listicle? Is it a different type of blog? And we'll just count the page types and then choose whichever one Google has decided to rank the most frequent on page one.
Yep. So you mentioned internal linking earlier. How are you managing that? And what are some of the strategies and techniques you're using with internal linking to add relevance to your topics?
So when we do this keyword grouping, what we get back is a list of pages of content that we need to create, and we'll just pick the most valuable one from the top of the list. So if there's, let's say, 300 pages in this list of content we need to create, we'll say these top 10 need to be internally linked in every single blog post. And then we have a system where our writers can also look for relevant internal links within the content calendar that we have in front of them. So they have these mandatory 10, we need them to do 5 natural. They'll go to this big list, they'll see what's in the pipeline, and they'll just create an upcoming external or internal link to that page of content.
How important do you think internal linking is to your strategy that you're deploying? What if someone wanted to skip it? I mean,
I think internal links do what people think backlinks do. Whenever there's a keyword that I really want to rank for and I haven't gotten there with doing nothing, then the very next thing that I do is drive as many internal links to it as I possibly can. And so far, we've never been like, oh, we need to figure out a second step after that.
You never had to turn to backlinks or other on-page methods.
It just works. And I think that's a great way to say it is the reason I don't know how to build backlinks is I just never had to do it to get the desired outcome.
Right.
I heard they're great. And I wish I had them as a tool in my tool belt because, I got to go build 1,000 internal links when I want to rank a page.
Well, I mean, it's music to people on this podcast here, I'm sure at least many of them. I mean, Spencer developed a plugin, Link Whisper, that does internal linking in an automated way for website builders and stuff. And so he has historically documented how targeting low volume keywords and then internally linking those together to bring relevance works. I mean, that's kind of how he ranks the vast majority of his sites historically. So that's going to make a lot of sense to most people listening to this. It really does. It's true. Data shows that.
It's approaching Google from an on-page perspective is very empowering because it means that all the variables for success are within your control. You can touch them, you can change them, you can manipulate them. And when you start relying on external things like backlinks, I feel like you give some of the control of success to someone else. And it's not a position of power to be operating in. I feel like it's a little bit of praying to the Google gods unless I own every variable.
It's very difficult to do at scale as well. I mean, what you're doing is difficult. Building backlinks at scale is also very difficult. So it's a measure of what's going to be the most efficient way for you to achieve your objectives, which I like how you keep coming back to saying like, hey, there's a lot of, I'm paraphrasing by the way, but there's a lot of ways to do this, but hey, here's what I know works. And it allows me to just focus on producing good content. And then I can focus on one singular thing and I know it works and it works at scale.
Yeah. And I was talking about this with a friend. So we believe that, again, Google's going to use user engagement metrics and content value to influence where you rank. And for me, that's like, I'm so thankful that I have a framework to make decisions off of because there's 1,000 decisions I'll have to make on my website. And if my framework is what's best for the user, then that guides every decision I'll make. But if the key to success is this like black box, then it introduced, like, I don't have a framework for decision making anywhere on the website. It's all kind of like hacky and, like, do I get lucky? And that's like, someone who wants to win, it's not a good place to compete from.
Well, I certainly feel a bit like you, where there are some people, and I've gotten to have the pleasure of interviewing some of those people on this podcast that, man, their brains can just handle a lot more than mine can in terms of all the different intricacies that go into ranking a page. So I think your approach is refreshing for a lot of people. You have a very singular mindset about your concepts, about your theories on Google, and then you have a process that you've developed that fits that narrative, right? And so you can always turn back to that. You can always grab the same tool out of the tool shed. And you don't have to have every tool in the tool shed. Your tool shed's nice and small, nice and lean, and you've got a team that's structured around the singular tool you use to accomplish your task. I think it's refreshing. So it's really good. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. It's been a hard fought battle. I've tried to actually get into SEO 3 times. It didn't click till the last time. The first 2 times I focused on technical stuff and I focused on backlinks, and I just never got the amount of traction that I needed to continue to invest in learning SEO. And if that would have happened on the first time, I would have been in the SEO game for over 10 years. But it didn't click until the 3rd time. And I think a lot of people go through that too, where they want to do SEO, they read articles that say there's 200 ranking factors, and then they just spend their whole time in learn mode, and especially learning variables that aren't ultimately that important. And yeah, there might be 200 variables, but I'm only thinking about, a handful in anything that in any context.
Talk about those mistakes for a little bit. What were some of the big ones that caused you to end up down this road? And I mean, 3rd time's the charm, but what were the first 2, maybe from a high level? Like, what were the mistakes that you felt prevented you from succeeding the first 2 times?
SEO is very difficult to learn because good learning requires 2 things. So the first is a tight feedback cycle between action and evaluation, completely missing. Mm-hmm. The second is being able to isolate independent variables and attribute, what you measured to specific variables so you can take a guess and iterate. And that's also missing. And I think that probably more people try and learn SEO and fail and then go do something else than actually continue on in that SEO journey because of those 2 things. And so, like I said, for me, I think when I first started learning in like 2010, I didn't know what communities to pay attention to. I didn't have anyone to look up to. I didn't have any SEO friends to bounce ideas off of. And at that point in my career, SEO was just an aspiration. No one was paying me to do it for my job. And so when I didn't see the success, I just pursued something else.
Makes sense. Yeah. It's easy to fail out of the gate on this. That's for sure. I mean, so if you're listening, hey, if Nick would tell you 3rd time's the charm, keep going. Hey, so as we come to a bit of a close, or as we start to wrap up, can I just hit you with some rapid fire questions that have to do with some of the things you've talked about? So I've been taking notes, and I don't want us to end without at least asking a few of these. So, okay, here's a bit out of left field. So going forward, where does AI play a role in your content process, or does it already play a role in it?
So I thought AI content was like 10 years away from like actually being where it needs to be until I saw OpenAI's DALL-E. And DALL-E is their new framework where you can type in a prompt and it will create images based off of that prompt. So if you Google DALL-E, they have this prompt: an armchair in the shape of an avocado. And OpenAI basically programmatically generated a bunch of pictures of armchairs in the shape of avocados. And it's the most mind-blowing thing that I've ever seen. So I think AI content is going to be there soon. I don't think it's there today. I think AI content is best used for productivity enablement. I think there's a couple verticals of content where I think AI can write it completely, but I think those are opportunities. Like, I've seen this website: is the drinking water safe in X city? Is X country safe? Well, there's 1,000 articles. They're all structured exactly the same, and they just switch the city name and a couple other details. AI content crushes for that.
Okay. That's pretty crazy. I haven't looked into DALL-E. At scale, you're doing 800 of these. You have big clients that come to you, and you're doing these big content pushes. Where's the middle ground? Because you're obviously at the top of the spectrum, and then you're arguing, and it makes sense that, hey, if you're only going to publish, say, 5 articles a month, you don't have the velocity to get the relevance needed to outweigh the backlinks, the authority, the other things you talked about. So at 800 articles, you're obviously able to out measure those other tangible requirements. where's the middle ground? Like if I'm somebody sitting here and I don't have that big of a budget, I don't have that big of a team, I don't have the processes laid out, how much do I have to do to trigger some of these successes?
It's kind of like it's a sliding scale, and it's kind of like health and fitness. Some is better than none, and more is better than some, and a lot is better than more. So, if you can't do 800, do 100. If you can't do 100, do 50. If you can't do 50, do 10. Whatever.
Everything you can.
Yeah, like I have some, I have a couple projects. We publish 70 to 100 to 200 pages of content. Those also hit 100,000 organics a month. So you don't need to have a team of 45 writers and editors to create an incredible impact. The company that we were doing this for was very uniquely positioned where they have 100,000 opportunities to get in front of a qualified audience because their app has 75 different features. And most companies just aren't like that. Most companies, maybe 1,000 pages is like the most they'll ever want to publish.
Right. Okay. That's encouraging because I could feel a little deflated coming off this saying, oh, that sounds amazing, but I just can't do 800 pages.
Most of our clients can't too, and we're able to create incredible outcomes for them at even just 20 pages a month.
Okay. So I think what you're really saying is, we had a recent interview with Luke Jordan, who took a website from basically being nailed by a Google algorithm update to 1 million page views a month within, I think, less than a year. And he echoed, you guys have very different approaches from what I can tell, just being the interviewer, but he took a very similar approach in mindset to saying we needed to publish as much as we possibly could on the subject to show Google that we're the authority. And I think that probably is the most important thing to take away. Yes, we're using a wonderful case study of 800 pages, and we've talked at length about publishing everything possible, but really go as hard on content as you can. It's your greatest tool to ranking is basically what you're trying to kind of summarize.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this approach is really accessible because I see all these non-SEOs using content velocity effectively to get graphs that look like this.
So, hey, talk a little bit about Workello and what it does and, what you have going on over there.
Yeah, definitely. So for us as an agency, we were capacity constrained. We had more business than we could support because we didn't have enough good writers. So we spent like 1,000 hours basically building a better way to hire writers on autopilot. But that's not attainable or feasible for most organizations. You just simply can't, you don't have a business case like we do to spend 1,000 hours building an automated hiring funnel. And so we just turned it into a SaaS. So now anyone can hire like a 45-person agency for like the page of a couple, the cost of a couple pages of content.
Wow. So how does that work? How does it work? Tell me.
So just like I told you, the number one lever for better SEO results is to publish more content. The number one lever to get better writers is to evaluate and test more writing candidates. It's very simple. If you evaluate and test a handful of writing candidates, you don't hire the best, you hire the least worst because none of these guys are great, but it was so much work. I'm just going to hire this guy. And then you hire them and then you spend way too much time editing and they leave anyways. You either terminate them or they resign. And then you just have to do the process all over again. And so our theory is basically instead of evaluating and testing a couple, evaluate and test 200. And then whoever you hire is going to be the best out of those 200. And you're much more likely to get a great writer at the price point you can afford.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like you're walking down memory lane for me when you talk about hiring a writer. Everything you just said, I'm getting a little pain points as you outline it. Cool. Well, let's see. That is, and people can go check that out. Is that something that is it just for agencies or individuals?
Yeah. We have dozens of agencies using it. They love it.
Okay. And that's at workello.com. So workello.com. Any other ways people can kind of follow along with what you're doing? I mean, do you publish any of these case studies of clients and success stories? Or where can people kind of keep up with you?
Yeah, definitely. So I get pretty naked and I share, some people say I share too much. That case study from 0 to 1.5 million organics a month, we have a 5,000 word playbook. Like you can start implementing it as you read it. We publish a lot of content on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook and our content ops community. I'm everywhere. I'm everywhere.
And clearly in the Bahamas as well right now. So Well, we'll get some of those links in the show notes for people who want to catch up on some of those case studies and follow along. Nick, is there anything I didn't ask you about that in closing that you think would be really important for everyone to hear?
No, you're an incredibly thorough interviewer. I think you hit all the major points. Like you got everything.
Well, we had it all outlined ahead of time. That always makes preparation is key. I'll tell you that much. This has been a really intriguing deep dive. Thank you for bringing so much, not only knowledge, but excitement, energy to the topic of content, because I'm sure everyone's interested in learning more about topic, but the way you've created velocity and the approach you take is really pretty inspiring, actually. So thanks for coming on the Niche Pursuits podcast.
Thank you so much. There's nothing special or unique about me. I'm just a normal guy. And if I can figure it out, anyone can figure it out.
Well, with that, we'll leave everyone. And thanks again, Nick. We'll talk soon.
Thanks a lot.
If you're looking for high quality backlinks in every niche imaginable, check out the industry leader when it comes to premium links, and that's Authority Builders. Authority Builders is the same company Spencer used in his Niche Project number 4 website, which he recently sold for $250,000. They have a large selection of link types, from guest posts to link insertions to business citations. You can choose your links a la carte or use their managed service ABC Plus to let one of their SEO experts analyze your site and niche and then take care of the entire backlink strategy for you. Learn more at authority.builders.